Hello everyone, Panzer J back with a new video. This is video number 2 of the current game that I have going on, Historical Board Gaming's Global War 39. If you remember back to the first video, which was a couple of weeks ago, we completed the first 5 turns of the game, and we're about to start turn 6. Finally was able to get the Incredible Falk out again yesterday to play a little bit more. Actually, we played a lot more, about another 7 hours. We're up to, I believe this is at the start of turn 14. So we're all together about 15 hours and 13 complete turns of this game. And as you're going to be able to see a little in a few minutes here as I pan over the board and kind of explain a little bit of the action, we're still got quite a ways to go. So, as I mentioned, we had completed the first 5 turns of the game in the first video, and we're about to start turn 6, and that would have meant Germany was about to go, and I had Moscow nearly surrounded at that point, and I had thought that that was going to kind of be what determined the game. I thought if Moscow fell at that point, that an Axis victory was all but assured. And then if Moscow was able to hold out, I wouldn't have had much left in Russia. So he would have been able to build back up for several turns. And it would have probably meant an Allied victory. And if you remember, I am all 3 of the Axis powers, Germany, Italy, and Japan. And then the Incredible Falk has taken on the role of all the allies. It's just the 2 of us playing. Although yesterday we did have one of our coworkers come over, Agent 367, and he kind of observed and kind of got a feel for the game. So he was here the whole time, again, observing and just taking everything in. And he's going to be participating in the next game that we get going. This one we still have to finish, but once we're done with this, he is going to participate. I will still take on the role of the Axis powers. I actually kind of wanted to try the Allies out, but with just the 3 of us playing, and it's going to be the 2 of them on one side, it doesn't make sense to give them the Axis. Have 3 countries to split up between the 2 of them, and then I take on the role of 6 allied nations. Much more makes much more sense if the 2 of them split up the allies. So not sure how they're going to split the allied countries up. That's going to be between the 2 of them, but I'll be the Axis again, and then it'll be old Panzer J against the Incredible Falk and Agent 367. So we'll see how that game turns out, and of course I'll be doing some videos of the after-action report. But let's get back to this particular game. So again, at the beginning of turn 6, I thought the fate of maybe the entire game was resting on what happened there. And I did go into Moscow as Germany, and Moscow did fall, and it actually fell rather easily. I didn't lose a whole heck of a lot in return. So Germany was sitting pretty. They had a few more territories to the east of Moscow to take. But other than that, Germany was sitting on pretty much Europe completely under their control, from the west coast of France all the way east to Moscow, and everything in between, up north to Norway and down south to Greece. So I thought at that point the game was pretty much won. Italy was doing fairly well, and then Japan was doing their own thing. My strategy of the old Axis vice grip was working very well. Not only was obviously Germany running through Russia, but Japan had went up into the Far East, and at one point they had all the Russian territories from Novosibirsk in central Russia, and the last Russian factory all the way to the Pacific Ocean. All those territories worth any dollar amount were all under Japanese control. But how wrong I was about Moscow being the determinant if the Axis were going to win, because the Incredible Falk has pulled off a few different moves that have kind of taken me by surprise. I've definitely made a few mistakes myself, mostly with Japan, which I'll get into in a minute. I think as the game sits now, if we kind of pan over the entire board, and I'll zoom in here in a little bit so we can get a closer look. But going across the board, I think at this point, and again, we're 13 turns completed, so we're about to start turn 14 here. I think it's going to be an Axis win. I think we're maybe about 75-25. Maybe that's a bit optimistic. Maybe 60-40 that the Axis are going to pull the game out. But it's been a lot tougher road than I thought it was going to be. Again, especially after Moscow fell at the beginning of turn 6. So what has kind of been a few missteps or kind of surprises for me? Well, Germany continues to more than hold their own. They are definitely carrying the heavy weight for the Axis cause. They're sitting at an income of 94, and they get a $5 bonus, so they're basically getting $100 just about per turn. So they are sitting on a bunch of money, and they're sitting on a bunch of troops. If we take a look, zoom in a little bit into Europe itself, you'll see a lot of stacks of German forces in Germany and into France. We've got about 5 Tigers sitting in Paris. And then we've got several stacks of men along the German and Holland coast there. In West Germany, you got 2 stacks of 10, so 20 total German infantry. We got about 8 infantry in Holland. In Berlin, we've got 2 stacks, 10 each of tanks and mechs. And then we got another stack of 10 German infantry in Stettin. So basically, I've succeeded in making Fortress Europe a reality. It's going to be extremely difficult for him to get back into Europe at all, or if he does, to stay. I've got, like I said, in Berlin, I've got the tanks and the mechs as kind of a mobile reserve to move around a little bit to counter wherever he might land. He has landed a couple of times. He landed in Denmark, and then he landed up by Karelia in the Soviet Union. And both of those forces have been wiped out. It took me maneuvering things around a little bit, but they've been all wiped out. So I'm feeling pretty secure. Germany the factories are getting bombed. I don't have any damage markers on the factory, just keeping them up on the dry erase board where we're at. So West Germany right now is being bombed for all the maximum 20, so that can't produce any units. And Berlin is being bombed for 16. Not quite the maximum, but again, they still can't produce any units. But I'm not overly concerned about it. I've got more than enough money to pay off that damage and then immediately put stuff down. Plus, again, if you look at where we're at in Europe, Germany's got more than enough forces, probably for turns to come. They wouldn't really have to even worry about building anything. I also have this stack of about 20 German fighters in Norway. That's been kind of flying around, taking out some of his ships. And as you can see, as far as in British Navy, he only has 3 destroyers and a submarine. And then he does have a couple of U.S. destroyers and 3 U.S. transports there. But that's it for a Navy. So I've been using those fighters to fly around and kind of pick off the Navy where I can. They're actually on this German turn going to fly back down into Germany itself and kind of stay there as another part of my counterattack reserve in case he were to set foot back in Europe. On their way, I'm going to have them come down and take out these 3 British destroyers on this German turn. As you can see, he has no fighters in England at all, so there's no scramble possibility. So my 20 fighters will be more than sufficient to take out those 3 destroyers. And with those 3 destroyers gone, I'm then going to swing over these 3 subs, 1, 2 spaces, and take on these couple of U.S. destroyers. And those 3 subs should be able to take out the destroyers. If they do, then those transports go down to the bottom of the Atlantic as well. So then he'll have no transports and no destroyers over in the Atlantic at all. So I plan on doing that. I don't want to get too heavy into what I'm going to be doing exactly in the coming turns, just because the game is still, even though I think I've got the upper hand, the game is still in the balance. So I don't want to give the Incredible Falk any kind of heads up as exactly what's coming next. But those are 2 specific things. So I should be able to take out those British and U.S. destroyers and transports, land the planes back in Germany, and hopefully still have at least 1 sub prowling the Atlantic to negate that 1 British bonus of no German subs in the Atlantic. As you can see, those are the only German, not only subs, but only German ships at all on the board. And that's been kind of one of my, if not mistakes, it's definitely been one of the thorns in my side. He's bombed my German naval bases, so I haven't been able to produce naval units other than those 3 subs for probably about the last 6-7 turns. Germany starts the game with 1 naval base in Stettin, which he bombed fairly early, I believe a few turns into the game. So I had produced a decent amount of subs by that point. But he took out that naval base, and then a few turns ago, I went ahead and bought 2 naval bases. 1 I put in Stettin and 1 I put in West Germany. So thinking, okay, well, now I'm about to start cranking out the U-boats again. And that didn't work out. As soon as I put them down, he immediately bombed the 1 in West Germany and completely destroyed it. So that was a complete waste of $15 for that naval base. And then on the next turn, he took out the next one. So $30 right down the tubes, and all I got to produce was these 3 German subs. So that was annoying to say the least, but shit happens, I suppose. So he definitely got the better of me there, but these 3 subs should at least do a little bit of damage until he can take them out. Other than that, over in Russia, as you can see, I'm at the doorstep to the Caucasus there. I got a bunch of mechs, several stacks of mechs, a big stack of tactical bombers, and some tanks. So again, without tipping my hand too much, I'm definitely going to come into this territory here and wipe out that British force. And as you can see, that'll basically leave the Middle East completely open. So I can start going down there and hopefully taking some of those territories. As you can see, all those British roundels down there, their Middle East is completely undefended. And then also maybe come over here to this Russian territory down a little bit and maybe start applying some pressure to the Far East Command's back door there. Because as you're going to see in a few minutes, that's definitely a major issue, the Far East Command. So that's kind of what Germany's up to at the start of turn 14. So I should be able to, wipe out what Allied ships he has in the Atlantic, and no threat then will be left for any kind of invasion, probably for turns to come. I still have that stack of 20 German fighters that, like I said, are going to patrol around and hopefully take out ships that he does produce. I'll finish taking the last of the few Russian territories down in the Caucasus that are worth any kind of money, and maybe start making a push down into the Middle East and even over into India. So that's where I'm at with Germany. As far as Italy goes, actually not too bad. Their income isn't the greatest. They're only collecting $19 right now. But if you kind of take a look at the Mediterranean, there's no Allied ships at all. Those 2 blue French ships are actually Vichy French ships. So those are mine. So he has no ships in the Med, so I'm getting the $5 for Italy for no surface Allied ships in the Mediterranean. So I'm collecting $24 a turn for Italy, which really isn't too bad. If you think about it again, we're 13 turns, 15 hours into this game, and Italy's still viable. Mussolini's still sipping tea in Rome as we speak. So, and speaking of Rome, if we take a look at Rome, we got a stack of about 15 men and a stack of about 10 fighters. So, a decent force in Rome itself. They also have $49 to spend on this turn 14. They saved their money from the last turn. So Italy's in fairly decent shape. They don't have anything left in Africa. They've been completely booted out of Africa. But again, if you're collecting mid-20s and you're even still in the game as Italy, 13 turns in, and can still be a little bit of a thorn in Britain's side, then you're doing something at least fairly decent for the Italians. One big mistake, kind of like with the Germans and the naval bases, I had saved all of Italy's money a turn or two before this as well. Bought a bunch of transports because you can see these British tanks weren't in North Africa, so North Africa was almost completely defenseless. So after turtling for X number of turns as Italy, I produced 5 transports, spent $40, and was going to start ferrying those men over and start taking back territories in North Africa, and he completely bombed all those transports before I even got to use them. So there was $40 right down the toilet. And he bombed those with, you're not seeing that incorrectly, that's about a stack of about 25 or so British fighters. So that's definitely something to worry about. That's one reason why I haven't been able to produce any kind of Navy. He just comes down and bombs those. He also has 4 strategic bombers up in England. So really, I'm at a disadvantage trying to produce any kind of Navy. Although I might start producing some Italian submarines. And with no destroyers, he's not able to spot those, so they're going to be able to roam free and not worry about his Air Force. So that could be a possibility. But overall, again, I don't think Italy's in too bad a shape, all things considered, and might even be able to start going on the offensive again a little bit. And then we come to the biggest mistakes I've made, which is Japan. Japan's in a little bit of a rough shape, although it's not as bad as it might first seem. We're down to $40 for Japan as far as what I'm collecting. They were at one point in the 70s, maybe even high 70s, plus bonuses. They were up over $80 a turn. They're now down to $40. So definitely got some issues. And then you can see he's got a U.S. fleet, a couple of U.S. fleets starting to be produced. Those are the Iowa class U.S. battleships. All his battleships are now Iowa class because we're past turn 10. So he's got super battleships, and he's got a bunch of destroyers off the west coast of the United States. Japan, I got these 2 fleets. They are Yamato battleships. One has 2 damage, then 2 loaded carriers. They're making their way back to the Japanese home islands and the safety of Japan. In China itself, again, your eyes do not deceive you. Japan has been completely kicked out of China. I mean, they've lost not only any Chinese territories they had, but all their original territories as well. The Far East Command and China are like completely running wild on the Asian mainland. The only Japanese territories I have left are the ones I have left up in Russia, and even he's starting to make a move into those territories as well. So down in the South Pacific, we still got some of the Money Islands still holding on to the Philippines. Although, as you can see with these transports, he's started to make his way back into the Money Islands and take those back from me. So, based on all that, you might think Japan is really hurting. And it's not great, but I've got a couple of things going on. Again, without trying to reveal too much, the U.S. fleets he's got over here off the west coast, they're going to take at least 2 turns to make it to Japan. So by then, the Japanese battleships will be fully repaired, and I plan on producing a bunch of destroyers each of the next 2 turns. So by the time he would be able to get to Japan, he's going to be facing a pretty resurgent Japanese Navy. So I don't think Japan itself is in any danger. And then as far as taking back some of the territories and whatnot, I've got these 4 Japanese transports, 8 men, and then I also have 2 more transports and a stack of men in Japan itself. So I'm going to start coming down with those, and I should be able to start taking back these money islands. He doesn't have a lot down here to defend them. I could even start landing back in some select territories on the mainland, like maybe Singapore and whatnot. So I think I'm going to be taking some of these back. Here, he's only got them defended by a single transport, or excuse me, a single destroyer along with the Anzac transport and the Far East Command transports. These planes aren't going to be able to scramble because they're not at an air base. So I should be able to take out all those ships on this next turn. And with those transports gone, he can't like start island hopping anymore and start taking that stuff back. So I think I'm going to increase Japan's income by 10, 12 bucks this next turn. And, we back up in the 50s. Asia itself is pretty much, the Asian mainland is pretty much gone to me. But I'm not worried about that. I think with maybe some German pressure and then maybe with some Japanese pressure down in the South Pacific, he's going to have to start thinking about defensive action and not offensive action. So that's where Japan sits. And then as far as what went wrong with Japan, well, like I said, this game has definitely taught me some good lessons as far as how to play Japan. The first game that the Incredible Falk and I had, I ran through him fairly easily. I think we called the game around turn 10 or so, roughly. And Japan was definitely much more powerful than they are right now. They had a lot more money. They had the U.S. bottled up, I think, and whatnot. But my big mistake here was, and it was kind of twofold. My initial strategy was I wasn't going to really go heavy into China. I did buy a few industrial complexes, which are no longer there because they've been destroyed from the territories being taken over. But I wasn't going to go heavy into China. I was going to do the Axis vice grip, attack Russia in the Far East, pick up, spend a lot of my effort in the South Pacific to take all the big money islands. And that's where I kind of thought things would go and then, see how things unfolded from there. Well, both of those went well. Japan did go up into the Far East and they took all those Russian territories, as I mentioned. Russia was really battled up. And that's some decent money for Japan. And then in the South Pacific, I had totally taken over all of these islands. Sumatra was mine, Java, Dutch New Guinea, New Guinea, all of these islands, the Solomon Islands, everything was mine through here. So I was collecting a bunch of money and looking pretty good. I was purchasing Yamato battleships almost every turn. Japan was in good shape. My big mistake was I didn't finish off any one country in the Pacific as Japan. So China, I was making my way to Sichuan. I had a few territories, but I never did the knockout blow to China. Same thing with the Far East Command here. I had them pretty much backed up into Calcutta for the most part, but they were still standing. And then I never did invade Australia. And again, Anzac was kind of just hanging around. And while all 3 of those countries were still alive and kicking, even if they were, kind of bottled up, I then decided to go ahead and invade the United States. And that was the other big mistake. And it kind of all stemmed from the same thing. So as you can see, Alaska has a Japanese roundel. Also, British Columbia, Alberta, Pacific Northwest, Western United States, and Midwest all were mine at one point. They were all Japanese. But I didn't have nearly enough to hold them. So that whole United States adventure was kind of a folly on my part. It took up a bunch of resources that could have been spent elsewhere, took my fleet out of position. And as you can see, I've got Alaska left. And then over on the other side of the board, I do have one Canadian territory over there. But that's it. So, and he's about to take those both back. So that was a big mistake. And I think if he decides to come after Japan itself, I think he's going to find how difficult that is to, not only do you need the naval combat units like battleships and carriers and cruisers and destroyers, but you also need to get a shit ton of transports and then a shit ton of ground units. And that's a lot to produce. And then it's got to make it over, okay? And obviously your opponent's going to see you coming, going to start building up a bunch of ground units. That's what he did. As soon as I landed in Alaska, he built up like 10 tanks in San Francisco and like 5 mechs. So you're immediately going to start building ground units so that even if you win the naval battle, it's going to be extremely difficult for you to land and stay in that territory, whether you're United States going to Japan or Japan going into the United States. So those were a couple of big mistakes I made. I think in future games, as the Japanese, maybe stay away from the United States altogether. Even if you've got the rest of the Pacific under control, it's still just with how much money the United States has, it's just going to be really difficult to build up enough forces. You're going to have probably about 10 transports. That's, 20 infantry units or 10 infantry units and then one each, a tank or artillery. But even still, you would probably need at least a good 20 units to be able to land somewhere in the United States with any hope of holding it, even if, you get a successful foothold. So it's just too much money, too many resources, and I don't really think you have much of a chance of holding it anyway. So that was the biggest mistake, was going after the United States, but it was compounded by my inability or lack of enough attention to knocking out ANZAC, Far East Command, or China. So I allowed all 3 of those countries to kind of get resurgent and come back on me while I was busy with my United States folly and, like I said, spending all my resources over there. So that's the kind of situation Japan finds itself in. So as the Japanese for future games, probably stay away from the United States altogether, but you have to completely knock out some of these other countries. I would say probably 2 of the 3. So between China, Far East Command, and ANZAC, whichever 2, if you can take those out, that would have made my United States adventure not nearly as damaging to Japan, because then their back door, so to speak, in the South Pacific wouldn't be in danger of being kicked in, because I would have taken out a couple of these allied powers in the South Pacific. But as it is, they have now all come back with a vengeance. And if we take a look at the board, you can see what I'm talking about here. The Far East Command is getting a ridiculous $46 plus bonuses. ANZAC's only getting $11 but bonuses. And China's up to a ridiculous $23. So the Far East Command alone is bringing in more money than Japan. The United States is at 74 plus bonuses. So if the United States is spending pretty much all of their money in the Pacific, which they have been because of the Japanese threat the last few turns, you're talking 74 US, 46 Far East Command, that's $120, 23 China, that's 144, 11 ANZAC, 155 plus bonuses. So you're probably talking upwards of $175 the allies are spending in the Pacific to Japan's 40. So it doesn't take a mathematician to figure out those odds are severely stacked against Japan. But again, like I said, it's not as bad as it seems at first. I got some time before the U.S. can reach me, and by the time they do, I'll have a formidable Navy and ground units in Japan. And he doesn't have a ton in the South Pacific. I'm going to be able to take all these islands back here pretty soon, if not on this next turn or two. And again, I'm going to use Germany, who's in phenomenal shape, to start applying some pressure in some other directions that he's going to have to worry about. So he's not going to be able to concentrate so much on Japan. So that's where we find ourselves at the end of 13 rounds of combat. hopefully we'll finish this up within the week. I think it'll take one more day and we should be completed, and we'll let you know how the game turned out. Take care for now.